Are you like most sales and other professionals who want to grow their wealth faster than what they are currently doing through their company 401k, even with that company match, the stock market, or just plain saving money? Would you sleep better at night if you had the financial freedom to be job optional in just 3 to 5 years through investing in real assets? Maybe you don't want to stop working, but wouldn't it be cool if you could retire a decade earlier than most? And do the traveling you and your family have planned for years while you're still young and can enjoy it? Let's face it, most busy professionals don't have the time or desire to take on more work outside of their W-2 to grow their wealth. On The Wealth Flow, each week we share the stories, the investments, and take a deep dive into the various asset classes that can deliver that accelerated growth to your portfolio passively. That's right, no extra work for you. Instead, we'll put your money to work. Learn what the 95% aren't talking about and join the top 5% of earners today on The Wealth Flow.
All right, welcome to The Wealth Flow. My guest today is Andy Schectman. He is an investor in precious metals, the first that we've had on the Wealth Flow. So, Andy, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Good to be here, brother. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to start with kind of your background, where you grew up and in this case, eventually led you to investing and then investing in precious metals.
Yeah, sure. So, grew up in Minnesota, 50 years there. I moved to Delray Beach, Florida a couple of years ago when Minnesota kind of lost its bearing, leading the nation's charge in defunding the police, and city turned into a place that I didn't quite recognize anymore, albeit I left my corporate office there, and I'll explain why I did that in a moment. But going back 34 years ago, I was just barely 20 years old, starting the company with my father on a wing and a prayer. My dad's middle name is Miles, and his best friend who lent us $60,000 to start the company, his middle name was Franklin. And really, we are the most unlikely cast of characters to have succeeded, starting in a one-room office the size of a closet to now getting just south of $10 billion in sales without ever having a customer complaint, ever. And the one thing that I would like to impart upon you and your listeners out there is the way that I have always looked at precious metals. I was 19 when I started learning this and 20 when I started it. And my father and I, starting with really nothing, he said to me, "Look, Andy, I won't let you make the same mistakes that I did in life. And hopefully this will turn out to be a good business. But there's only one rule that you will follow or I'll fire you." I'm like, "All right, cool. I can deal with one rule. What's that?" And he says, "You'll buy something, gold or silver, every 2 weeks when we get paid, period, or I'll fire you." All right, Dad, I can do that. Well, I've owned the company outright for north of 20 years, but I've honored my promise to my father, which was the best gift anyone has ever given me. The gift of getting out of the rat race, the gift of always paying myself first, no matter what, even if it's 1 ounce of gold or 1 ounce of silver or 50 ounces of gold, whatever it is, it was something. And I've always looked at gold and silver in this respect as wealth. It, to me, is not an investment. It is wealth that, Keith, has outlived 2 world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic, anything the world has ever thrown at it. And here we are, 5,000 years later, and the central banks of the world, who I will tell you not only are the most well-funded, but more importantly, more relevant, the most well-informed traders in the world. Not only has gold been reclassified the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset, but next to US dollars and treasuries in 2019 by the BIS, but those traders who know the playbook have bought more gold over the past 3 years than at any time in the last 100. And so what that tells me is that there's something big in store for gold and silver because the world views it as wealth, as money that has no counterparty risk, money that can't be sanctioned or confiscated the way the US dollar can. And we have our brain dead Treasury Secretary gallivanting around the globe saying that we need to confiscate the $380 billion in Russian reserves to give it to the Ukrainian effort. When you cross that line of weaponizing the dollar, there's no coming back. the Southern Hemisphere will never trust us again. And what gold and silver are to me, Keith, is wealth that is not simultaneously someone else's liability. And with our actions, our behavior around the world, I think a lot of the accumulation, like by China, 17 straight months in a row, is due to the weaponizing of the dollar and the realization that if these countries end up on the wrong side ideologically of the United States, well, they too can have their assets not only sanctioned like we did to Iran, but confiscated like they're trying to do to Russia. And that's a very, very no thing to do for the world reserve currency. And I think it will spell ultimately the end of the dollar hegemony. We still have the dollar supremacy, but the dollar hegemony, not so much. And if you're not a friend of the West, well, watch out. And I think that's the way it's being viewed. And so to me, gold is, I think, and silver, to me, I look at it the way the central banks do, not to get wealthy, but because it is wealth.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. It seems like we've crossed a couple roads there that we shouldn't, especially if we want to be, the ongoing world currency, because you have no other option if you're one of these countries that has been sanctioned or potentially could get sanctioned or confiscated from. If you're utilizing the U.S. dollar, you're in jeopardy of possibly, having that go away. So that in turn is screwing up our position as the world currency for sure.
This is where, I've been saying this for 4 years, and I've kind of stuck my neck out for 4 years, and I've been right, which freaks me out. You go back and listen to the 4,000 YouTube videos I've done over the last 5 years. And I've been saying the same thing in every video, that the end of the dollar hegemony is coming, that the end of the petrodollar is coming. And I want to touch on a few things. Most people don't know that the lead economic advisor to the United States government is a man named Jared Bernstein. Mr. Bernstein has a degree in music and a master's degree in social work, but he is the lead economic advisor to the Biden administration. His entire thesis is losing the dollar's world reserve status. That is a privilege we can no longer afford. Now think about it for a moment. Could this be intended? As stupid as that sounds, think about it. What did Biden do right away? Well, aside from stopping and shutting down the XL pipeline, he signed an executive order to go green. And then we've weaponized the dollar against Russia, as we've just talked about, telling the whole world, you better be on our side or else. Now, as a world reserve currency, that is not something you should ever do. But think about it. What makes the dollar the world reserve currency? A lot of people don't know that. And for the benefit of your audience who haven't heard anything that I've talked about before, at the end of World War II, we took over for the pound sterling as the world reserve currency. And we told the world, all the governments of the world, you take our dollars, and anytime you want to trade them into gold, you can do so at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce, making the dollar as good as gold. And it was from 1944 until 1971, when President de Gaulle from France started to realize that we were printing more money to fund the guns and butter endeavor, the Vietnam War, than we had backing it in Fort Knox. And so he sent warships over to New York Harbor filled with dollars and said, please, we want our gold. And we gave it to him. So much so that we bled down over half of the gold that the U.S. held, and Nixon took the then very controversial step of closing temporarily, he said, the gold window. So you can no longer, if you were a government, exchange your dollars into gold at 35 an ounce. In fact, you couldn't exchange them for gold at all. We went back on our promise to the world. And it was 2 or 3 years after that, 73, that Henry Kissinger was dispatched to Saudi Arabia and struck a deal with the Saudi kingdom. We will protect you. No one will ever mess with you. We'll provide you munitions and assistance. But for that privilege, you, and by extension OPEC, will value oil globally in dollars. That's why it's called the petrodollar. We are the world reserve currency in essence, because every single country in the world has to stockpile dollars, creating this synthetic demand in order to buy oil. Now, go back to what I just said. Jared Bernstein thinks that's a privilege we shouldn't and can't afford anymore. Biden signs an executive order to go green, right? So what has Saudi Arabia done in the interim? Well, Saudi Arabia has joined the Belt Road Initiative, the largest infrastructure project in human history. 75% of human population, 50% of global GDP. They've joined the BRICS. They joined the BRICS New Development Bank. They joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the largest regional financial and military organization on the planet. And in Davos last year, told the world that they are open to accepting other currencies for oil. Why would they want to continue to sell their oil in dollars when they too can have their Forex reserves confiscated if they cross the line, where they too would have to own a currency that is being inflated away to the tune of $1 trillion a quarter in debt accumulation right now. And they too can put all of their excess reserves, which was a condition of the petrodollar. You take your excess and put them into US treasuries. Well, how's that done for them over the last 2 years? Not so well. And so what I believe is happening is a transition away from the dollar as the singular, hegemony, world reserve status. Now, we still have the supremacy. Dollar still is 65, 70% of all transactions, but it used to be a whole hell of a lot more, and it will be a whole hell of a lot less. And I think when you realize that the BRICS went from 5 to 10, and another 36 countries have formally applied to the BRICS, the big meeting in October, as it is right now, they are already responsible for more than a larger swath of human population, a larger percentage of global GDP, 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals on the planet, the majority of all the rare earth metals and oil and natural gas production. More commodities than we could ever hope of producing are controlled by the BRICS nations. Now, little by little by little by little, then bang, all at once. What happens if Saudi Arabia does what United Arab Emirates just did? What did the UAE do? Well, the UAE just joined BRICS right alongside of Saudi Arabia. They are the 7th largest producer of oil in the world and an OPEC producer, and said, we do not want dollars for oil anymore. Well, Iran has said that, of course. So has Russia, and now UAE. So 3 of the 10 BRICS members have publicly said it. What happens when Saudi Arabia and the rest of the BRICS say, listen, guys, we appreciate the last 50 years. We do. And protecting us. Thank you. But look, you signed an executive order to go green, right? And your lead economic advisor doesn't want you guys to be the world reserve anymore. So we've joined this organization with the majority of human population who produces the oil anyway. And we've decided to no longer take dollars for oil. Bang, just like that. Every country on the planet has the incentive to dump dollars. And when those dollars hit our shore in a massive tsunami of inflation, what do interest rates do to compensate for that inflation? They spike to the moon. Not something Powell would do, but something the market would do. And there's your Klaus Schwab Great Reset moment when stocks, bonds, real estate, the banking system, and the insurance companies are all inversely correlated to a massive spike in interest rates. And why would they want to incentivize the governments of the world to do this, right? Why? Well, we have 155 trillion in debt, of which 70 plus trillion is Social Security off balance sheet. So 34 trillion on balance sheet, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government, military pensions, all of this stuff. And we have 5 trillion in assets, according to the 2022 balance sheet, which the biggest asset being 1.6 trillion student debt. The largest asset of this country, the land of the free, the home of the brave, is student debt. We are so far indebted. We're almost at 130% debt to GDP. And I don't know if the country's ever come back from that when you cross that line, ever in history. So why do it? Well, my mentor, Richard Russell, always used to say 20 years ago that the Fed was so far down the rabbit hole, they have 2 choices: to inflate or default. Well, look at us now, accumulating $1 trillion a quarter in debt, a country that's shed its manufacturing base, a country that doesn't produce anything anymore. And if they realize that mathematically, no, when I say mathematically, 1 trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. And we're 150 plus trillion in debt. When they realize that we're too far down the road and they have 2 options, inflate or default, how about option number 3? Find a villain. So you incentivize all of these countries to shed dollars, to unite under a common goal of pushback against the Western supremacy and hegemony and the coercion and the bombing. And look, we went into Iraq 20 years ago. We're still occupying their country. 20 years later, we're sanctioning 14 of their banks for trying to trade with restricted banks to buy liquid natural gas. And they made $95 billion in oil revenue last year that we hold. They can't even direct it. And they asked us for $1 billion at the end of 23. We said, nah, not right now. So what did they do? Well, they said, we're going to kick all Western coalition forces out of the country. Trading in dollars, if you own a company in Iraq, is illegal. You'll go to jail and lose your business. And as of January 1 this year, there are no dollars left, green dollars in the country. All the banks got rid of them. So when the world looks at us as being hypocritical, well, we can go into a country under the guise of weapons of mass destruction, say, sorry, we made a mistake, but we're still there 20 years later, controlling things and sanctioning things. The world looks at us as hypocritical. The same country that just signed an executive order to go green, the same country that is weaponizing and talking of confiscating Russian Forex assets, and we are viewed as hypocritical. Now, if the country, Keith, if the country had its shit together, well, then I wouldn't be so worried. But look at what's happening in this country right now. Open borders where 12 million people have come in illegally. Questions surrounding the legitimacy of our elections, of the fairness of the judicial system, lawlessness in the cities. I mean, wokeness everywhere, divisiveness, black, white, red, blue, vaccine, no vaccine, you name it. You're defined by who you voted for. When we talk about gold and silver, this is not about getting wealthy. It is wealth. And it's wealth that's outlived everything the world's ever thrown at it. And what I see coming to me, and I've been right, and that's what scares me more than anything. People can go back and listen to what I was saying in 2019 and 2020. I've been saying this exactly. And when no one was talking about it. And if it happens, it'll be a religious experience that no one sees coming, except the very few people who are opening their eyes enough to understand that there are unintended consequences for the actions we take. But when you realize that the lead economic advisor wants this, well, maybe these consequences are intended. And the last thing I'll say before I shut up and listen to your questions is that the number two in charge at the White House for economic policy is a woman named Lael Brainerd, who spent time at the Treasury, and she was just number two at the Fed underneath Powell, but left and became the second in charge for economic policy. Now, she's a modern monetary theorist. She believes in unlimited printing. She just ran point with FedNow, which came out about 6 months ago. And for those of you who don't know what FedNow is, Google it. It's like Venmo or Zelle on steroids backed by the Fed. And over time, it will take the place of checks and wires, or instantly you wire money across or send money like you do on Zelle. And she also worked with MIT in development of the new CBDC that Biden fast-tracked by executive order. And so, well, what does she want? Well, she wants the whole system to blow up so they can come in and issue a new central bank digital currency. And it's a whole hell of a lot easier to reset a system when you can point to a villain, those sons of bitches who did it to us, than it is to say it was the brain-dead monetary policy of the Fed and the irresponsible spending addiction by the Treasury. We're sorry we screwed up. And when you realize that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and government military pensions, the $100+ trillion, that's all owed to the American public. And if you realize that the central banks of the world have been selling treasuries for the past 2 years and buying gold, who owns all the debt? The American public has been going headlong into treasuries for the last year plus, chasing yield. The majority of all of the debt that we owe is to ourselves. Whole hell of a lot easier to say, we're sorry, but they did it to us. I know everything that you own was wiped out. Your stocks, your bonds, your real estate, your bank account, your insurance. Have no fear. Lael Brainerd is here with her new CBDC. Just sign on the line, Keith. Sign on the dotted line, and you too will be made whole with the new CBDC. Now, look, everything I said up until that point is factual. But what is it? Occam's razor, take the most logical example. If we really wanted to retain the privilege of being the world reserve currency, well, we wouldn't have weaponized the dollar. We wouldn't sign an executive order to go green. We wouldn't leave our borders wide open. We wouldn't have questions surrounding the Justice Department, surrounding the fairness of the elections. We wouldn't let lawlessness happen in our cities, and on and on and on. Now, the question I would simply ask people to think about, is this too stupid to be stupid? Is this intended? And I can't get away from it. I can't get away from the fact that either the people leading this country have their head buried so far up there, you know what, and they don't realize the consequences, or they know exactly what they're doing and realize that mathematically we've hit the end of the road. So better to point to a villain, and a big one, Xi Jinping and Putin and OPEC, for no longer taking dollars for oil and the whole world dumping dollars in treasuries, than it would be for us to default or to hyperinflate. Those are the only two choices the Fed has at this point.
Yeah. Wow. Andy, I didn't realize you were going to unload that.
Neither did
I'm
I.
I'm feeling great about the future now. No, I'm kidding. So what's the solution there? I mean, obviously, we're obviously going to dissect precious metals and investing in precious metals, but are we so far down this road that there's no turning back, or what? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, unfortunately, I think we are. I think mathematically we are too far down the road. I mean, the first thing that would have to happen is that the government would have to stop spending. We have a government that is addicted to spending. And when you are accumulating, in essence, $4 trillion in debt per year, remember, trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. And we are a country that has 5 trillion in assets, according to the U.S. government balance sheet. Google it. You'll see that. The largest asset being student debt. We have no assets, tremendous liabilities, and we spend money as if it grows on trees. That is the exorbitant privilege of being the world reserve currency that we should be doing everything we can to foster and nurture rather than to destroy.
Yeah.
So what is the solution? It's to buy things that are not tied to the dollar. In other words, I remember a long time ago when we started our company, it was mostly Swiss investments. And I spent a couple summers in Zurich learning from Swiss bankers when I was 19 and 20 and 21. And I never met a Swiss banker ever who wouldn't have 10% of their assets in gold, even in the best of times, and let alone the worst of times. But I remember talking to a Swiss banker one night, and he said to me, diversification is you're mediocre. You're the best of the worst of the worst of the best. It's a tool invented out of fiduciary responsibility by financial advisories. He said the way to succeed in investing is to first and foremost identify the primary trend, which is the way the river flows. That's what Richard Russell always said as well. What is the primary trend? And I believe ultimately the primary trend is of a falling dollar, ultimately. So what do? You jump in with both feet and you broadly diversify within the primary trend. Because if you broadly diversify right now, stocks, bonds, real estate, and interest rates spike to the moon, you're dead. But if you broadly diversify within the primary trend of a decaying dollar, you could buy things like precious metals, oil and gas, a farm or agricultural ETFs, anything opposite cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, anything opposite the dollar is the only place to be as far as I'm concerned. And I will say this one more time. If the most well-informed traders on the globe, the central banks, forget about the fact that they're the most well-funded, but they're the most well-informed. They know what's going on. They're the party where all the decisions are made. If they have been buying more gold over the past 3 years than any time in history, using the suppression of the Western paper markets to do this, why then it should tell you exactly where ultimately this is going. Do not do as I say, do as I do. And the central banks are voraciously accumulating gold and silver. And they have been using the suppression, the over leverage of the Western markets where the paper markets control the physical price to do this. Now, that's getting tougher to do. So what has China done recently? They've turned up the arbitrage spigot just a little bit, where right now silver is priced $3 an ounce higher on the Shanghai Metals Exchange than it is on COMEX or the LBMA in London, and gold about $80 higher. So what does that mean? That means that any of the bullion bank traders who have access to all three platforms can buy in Chicago, can buy in London, and deliver in China, who's accumulated gold for 17 straight months in a row, who the Bank of Montreal just came out with a report and said the numbers that they're reporting are way lower than what they are accumulating and producing. See, gold is being remonetized across the globe. It just hasn't happened in dollars yet because the rest of the world understands that being in dollars has not only interest rate risk, inflation risk, default risk, sanction and confiscation risk, where gold is an asset that is simultaneously no one else's liability. And what did the Bank of International Settlements do in 2019? Reclassified it as the world's only other tier one asset next to US dollars and treasuries. Put it all together, and it makes a whole hell of a lot of sense. So, yeah, I think what do? You minimize your exposure to dollars. If you are not a contrarian, you're destined to go broke, as far as I'm concerned, and or be a victim. That's for sure. So, I wish the message I had was happier, but it's not. And I guess there's a fine line these days, Keith, between uh, realism and pessimism. And I'm straddling, and I try not. I'm a very happy-go-lucky guy. I mean, I am, and you immerse yourself in this long enough, and it becomes depressing. But it doesn't mean you should put your head in the sand. I'd rather see what's coming, and as you say, what can I do? Try to get away from it, and not look at this as a way to get wealthy. Look at it as wealth that has outlived all of the problems the world's ever seen, but that the biggest money in the world who's writing the playbook, well, they're buying it hand over fist. That should be all you need to know.
Yeah, for sure. That's very interesting. Very interesting. Maybe if you could, Andy, give us just kind of an idea on, we talked just a minute before the show on, I think you said the big four, but what are the various precious metals that you can invest in? And maybe what are some of the advantages or driving forces that you see on each of those markets?
So there is obviously gold and silver, and then the other two would be platinum and palladium. And platinum and palladium lack the historical significance of being wealth. To me, they're tertiary, they're an investment. Gold and silver have been wealth for 5,000 years. And I don't know how many hundreds of times it's written in the Bible. And so to me, gold and silver are the primary targets. Platinum and palladium represent but a very small portion of my investments. And, platinum originally was used in catalytic converters of unleaded vehicles. That changed because palladium used to be about a third the price of platinum. And the auto manufacturers changed their assembly lines to use palladium for unleaded cars and platinum for diesel cars. But their primary use outside of other things is in catalytics. And, gold is wealth. Gold is a monetary asset, has some industrial assets, but since the beginning of time, man has been in search of gold as wealth. And silver is the interesting one. Silver has even a longer track record of being money than gold does since the beginning of time, the people's money. But it also is an industrial metal that is needed in so many things, like green and digital applications. There's 500 ounces in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile. Google that. You'll see that. And how many missiles are being thrown all over the place these days. Silver is an asset that is depleting in nature. For 5,000 years, the mining ratio, geologic ratio of gold to silver was 16-1. 16 ounces of silver found for every 1 ounce of gold in the Earth's crust. That has now fallen to 7-1 because, like your skin is epidermis, silver is found in nature in a form called epithermal, real near the surface. And so the big deposits were found decades ago. Last year, there was 1 billion ounces of silver that came to market, of which only about 300 million came from companies that mine silver. The remaining part of it, because it's hard to find, all the big deposits are gone. The remaining 70% came from primarily companies that are mining copper or lead or zinc. And, oh, hey, here's some silver. They stumble across it. And also a little bit of recycling. So much so that we had about a 250 million ounce shortfall between supply and demand, the second year in a row of structural deficiency between supply and demand. So it's depleting in nature, and it's increasing in demand in green and digital applications and in military applications. It's experienced a monetary renaissance. Now, we can get into manipulation of the gold and silver market all you want, but I will just simply tell you, they have been manipulated for the better part of 40 years, gold and silver, and it is ending. It is ending. And for those who don't believe that it has, JP Morgan in 2021 paid a $920 million fine to the Justice Department, the largest fine the Justice Department ever handed out for manipulation of the metals market. Their lead trader, Michael Nowak, is still in prison for running that. And it's a situation where there are big reasons why metals have been manipulated for a long time. And the biggest one being a term in economics called Gibson's paradox, which is the inverse relationship between real interest rates and gold. So for 20 years, we maintain super low interest rates to stimulate the economy, to create a perception or an illusion of wealth in our stock portfolio, our homes and whatnot, our 401k. And so they had to step on the canary in the gold mine, and that's gold. But when things are changing with the image of the dollar and of this country, and of the status quo, well, They say history doesn't always repeat, but it often rhymes. And here we are going full circle. And I do believe there's a man I follow named Zoltan Pozar, very smart man. He used to work at the New York Fed, probably understands the plumbing of the financial system better than anyone. I think he's at UBS now, but regardless, he said we've entered Bretton Woods 3. Bretton Woods 1 is when we took over for the pound sterling, as I mentioned at the beginning here in 1944. Bretton Woods 2, loosely, would have been when we became the petrodollar in 73, shed the gold backing and became the petrodollar. He says we are now into Bretton Woods 3, a system that will not be about opaque debt instruments and promises, but rather identified by commodities and transparency. What is gold again? Oh yeah, the only other tier 1 asset in the world. What have the central banks been doing? Oh yeah, buying the crap out of it, more so than any time ever over the last 3 years. Record amount, month over month over month over month. How do you make it happen? Well, you take gold to back a new system using distributed ledger technology, a marriage between blockchain and gold to give legitimacy to a system that has pissed in the punch bowl, so to speak. And nobody will ever drink that punch ever again if it's not backed by something. And that's why Kristalina Georgieva, the head of the IMF, said, if you issue a CBDC and it's not pegged to something, it's fiat. What would they peg it to? Oh yeah, the only other tier 1 asset. And that, just by coincidence, is what the finance ministers of Russia have told us the BRICS will ultimately do when they issue a currency. In fact, a new currency that they said will have 2 baskets attached to it. 1, a basket of the local currencies. 2, a basket of commodities. Now, I want to read to you one quick thing about that. And the gentleman who wrote this, he said, his name is Yuri Ushakov. And he came out and he basically said that the idea will be 2 baskets. One is a basket of national currencies of all the countries involved, like the SDR, which is special drawing rights by the IMF. And the second will be a basket of commodities. But he also said it will be in digital form, which means it can be used without the banking system. So that's your blockchain. But here's what he said. And I've been saying this for almost 4 years. He said the second part is price. For the moment. Price is determined by Western speculation. That's the COMEX and the LBMA, where oil can go to -40 a barrel, by the way. Now, he talks about that in a second. He says, for the moment, price is determined by Western speculation. We produce these commodities and we consume them, but we do not have our own price mechanism, which will balance supply and demand. During the COVID panic, the price of oil fell to nearly 0. No, he's wrong. It fell to -40. It's impossible to make any strategic planning for economic development if you do not control prices of basic commodities. Price formation with this new currency will get rid of the Western exchanges of commodities. And then about 2 weeks later, he just came out and talked about the new BRICS grain exchange, where they said the same thing. He says global prices are primarily determined by the Chicago Commodity Exchange. Moscow also seeks to move away from trading grain for U.S. dollars in favor of the national currencies of the BRICS member states. So what we are witnessing little by little by little by little, it's called logarithmic decay, little by little by little by little, then all at once, is a move away from settlement in dollars. Now, a lot of people were bummed out that they didn't issue a gold-backed currency or commodity-backed currency at the last meeting in August in Johannesburg. The next one is in October in Russia, and maybe they'll announce it then. Who knows? But the bottom line is that what they have done since then is all of this trade is being traded in local currencies, chipping away at the settlement value of the dollar. But remember, I said the other part of the petrodollar is the proceeds go into U.S. treasuries, the excess. Well, they're now shedding U.S. treasuries. They're not buying them, they're actually selling them, and they're buying gold in replacement. And if you go back to the beginning of the century, gold has outperformed everything. It's up about 9% per year on average, 9% per year since the beginning of the century. The bond market's about a third of that or less. And the S&P 500 is 7%, about 2% less. And so the bottom line is it's the tortoise, not the hare. So these countries say, what the hell do we want U.S. treasuries for in a country that can sanction us and confiscate us, a country that if we don't align ideologically, they'll cut us off, in a country that's inflating away their currency and destabilizing their bond market? Screw it. sell them slowly, not too fast to cut off your nose to spite your face. And instead of reinvesting them in treasuries, even though they're making 5%, buy gold, buy silver. Silver was up 10% last week. Gold was up 4% last week. So in terms of performance, in terms of counterparty liability, inflation risk, default risk, you name it, gold is now replacing, I believe, slowly the treasury. So you have a chipping away of the settlement status and a chipping away of the reserve status. Even if they don't issue a common settlement currency, which ultimately they will, it's happening right now, right in front of us. And the Western media is pathetic. They don't tell us what's really happening. And all of the people we love and care about, mom and dad and best buddy John and sister, whoever, they don't see it coming, and they're going to get run over by it when it happens. And that little by little by little by little, it's been happening for 3 years, 4 years. That all at once hasn't happened yet, but it'll happen on a Sunday night, Monday morning, and you will wake up to a whole new reality. Just this morning in China, right? Silver opened up 7% and triggered limit stops. It opened today 7% higher in China, triggered limit stops, gold up 3%. And silver is priced right now $3 an ounce higher in Shanghai. They are doing all they can to accumulate everything commodity-wise that's not nailed down. Not many people know that China bought the LME, the London Metals Exchange, a few years ago. That's different than the LBMA, which is primarily precious metals. The LME is base metals. So they're not just buying, and other commodities, they are not just buying gold and silver. They're buying all the copper, the zinc, the lead, the nickel, the soybeans, the wheat, the corn. They're buying everything they can. They are now buying from Brazil, who is the second largest exporter of corn in the world. They're buying soybeans and corn from them, paying for it in yuan, which is immediately convertible on the Shanghai Gold Exchange and deliverable into gold kilo bars immediately. So these countries like Iran is sidestepping sanctions by selling their oil to China for yuan and converting it into gold like that. And this transition is not being noticed or talked about. Instead, everyone in this country is fixated on things like NVIDIA and the rise of Bitcoin. And I'm not a Bitcoin basher. I think they don't have to be mutually exclusive of one another at all. But what I am saying is that all of that attention into the parabolic rise and of profit, greed, is ignoring the slow and steady and methodical rise of gold and silver. And people are missing this because the biggest money in the world, the central banks, what do they all own? It's not Bitcoin, it's gold and it's silver. And in the end, the commodities matter. And I think that's what people, I hope, will take away from this interview.
Yeah. You've got a great perspective on it and seem to have just a ton of knowledge on it as well. So I really appreciate it.
I slept at a Holiday Inn Express last night instead.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned that really that you keep the majority of your wealth in gold and silver, and so but you do still have the other two. So I guess tell me maybe what are some of the drivers of some of the others? Obviously, it sounds like silver has some utility outside of just being wealth. With what are some of the other things that are driving like the platinum?
Well, platinum has a very interesting argument that could be made for it. Platinum is shorted very heavily in the futures market and has created a distortion. Platinum is, 30, 40, 50 times more rare than gold, but I don't think it's probably even mentioned once in the Bible. And I'm not bringing religion into this, but simply saying that for 5,000 years, the world has looked at gold and silver as wealth. Platinum and palladium are indeed precious metals and are indeed an investment and indeed, I was just in Amsterdam and got a tattoo. So they're not forgotten. There's palladium and there's platinum right there. I've never had a tattoo before. I partied a little too hard in Amsterdam and that was the result of it, but I digress.
Awesome.
Anyways, enough to where I believe in them to put a tattoo on my arm. But I will tell you this, that I've been accumulating every 2 weeks for 34 years. And I probably, of my assets, I have 1 ounce of palladium. I know that. And I have maybe 3-4% of all of my holdings in platinum. If that tells you anything, to me, they are not wealth, they're investments. And where the world is going, I think it's more about return of your money rather than return on your money. And I just have a feeling that gold and silver will be the two places to go. Platinum and palladium, sure, you could put some money into it, and platinum would be my choice over palladium. But I think that this is more about wealth preservation. And when I look at what the central banks are doing, they're buying gold and silver. I don't see much of them buying platinum and palladium. The other argument for it is that the majority of platinum and palladium will be mined primarily in Russia, a little bit in South Africa. Oh, yeah, they're two of the BRICS countries, aren't they? All the rare earth metals, where are they mined? Oh, yeah, that's the Eurasian continent. And, we talk about how we are going to be reliant on all of the BRICS nations and these countries for the things that we need to run the system. We haven't thought that far ahead yet, but the bottom line is that platinum and palladium would be a distant third and fourth in my personal view in a holdings of a portfolio.
Okay. And as far as where these are mined, the U.S. doesn't have. Is there anywhere in North America that there's still a decent amount of gold, silver, that kind of thing that are being mined out? Or
yeah, I mean, Canada is very rich in natural resources.
Okay.
The Golden Triangle up in British Columbia and Canada has a tremendous amount of in-ground. It's ironic they've sold all their gold, but they have a lot of it in the ground. And there are, there's mining done in the United States in Nevada and whatnot. And there's a company called Stillwater Mining. They're a US-based company, I believe, and they mine platinum. So yeah, some of it comes from North America. And, but the majority, like if you look at silver production, most of it is Mexico and Peru. And you look at platinum and palladium, South Africa and Russia, and gold, South Africa, Canada, some of the US. So I would say that, yes, there is definitely gold and silver to be mined and platinum, palladium in the United States, but the majority would be found elsewhere.
Okay. And what tell us maybe, Andy, for the audience, when you purchase gold, silver, any of them, any of them, when you're purchasing them, are you purchasing the actual materials? Are you utilizing somewhere that kind of keeps it for you? What does that look like?
There's 20 ounces of gold right there.
Oh, wow. Nice.
You're in your, that's $44,000 each coin,
Really?
1 ounce gold American Eagle. We send it right to your door. Silver, some right here, same thing. Silver comes in tubes like this. Tube of
Okay.
Silver Eagles. Open it up, and Silver Eagles. There you go, right there. So, it's an asset that is not simultaneously someone else's liability. So with that being said, if you have the ability to take possession of it and not utilize storage, do it. I believe we have the best storage program in the industry. I believe we are the envy of the storage industry. We have worldwide exclusives with Brinks that no one else has. We have vaults all around North America, in Canada and the United States. But I make a little bit of money when people store in our program, but I would tell everyone, if you have the ability to take possession, you should do so. And, if this is a tube of 20 gold Eagles representing over 40 grand, you got two of them in your hands here, you got $90,000, you're running to your car. Point of it is that it's very transportable. Now, the difference is $90,000 worth of this, in silver terms, would be about 160 pounds. So when you talk about the difference, the one drawback to silver is logistics. If you can get by that, great. So, like the silver, I'll show you something here. This is a box of Silver Eagles. I took one of the tubes out. See that?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
42 pounds. That's minus the tube I just took out. That's 500 ounces. So 500 ounces is about $15,000 or this in gold. So the logistics, now the potential is better than anything, but the logistics make it tough. So you throw the logistics out of the equation, silver is the investment of a generation. But in the end, when the music stops, you probably want to be in gold. Why? Because it's the only other tier one reserve asset in the world, according to the Bank of International Settlements. And the central banks are proving that to be true. So yes, if you have the ability to take possession, do it. Just keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anyone about it. And, great. There you go. I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. I didn't realize just that little amount of gold would be that worth quite that much. For
It's
some reason,
over $2,300 an ounce right now. So
yeah.
10 coins with $23,000+. So it adds up quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll tell you what, Andy, we're running a little bit close on time, and I still have a couple questions for you. But
Sure.
why don't you, if you could, tell the audience how they could find out more about you, how they could work with your company to invest.
We have a website that will be, in my mind, right now. We have a new version coming out in June or July, but it's really for information purposes mostly. We do have prices there, but if they were to send us an email at info@Miles Franklin and say the Wealth Flow sent me, Keith sent me, and ask any questions that you've heard about here on this show, or just ask for our price list. The price list that we will send out to you, info@milesfranklin.com. Will be far more competitive than just about anyone in the country. Very, 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 very competitive. Lower than what you see on our website. There's no obligation to ask for prices or to ask questions about anything you've heard here or about precious metals IRAs or storage. But our website is milesfranklin.com. To get the price list or to ask questions, no obligation. info@milesfranklin.com. If questions are directed towards me, I try to get back to as many as I can, but this week alone, I have 15 podcasts and I'm on a lot of shows. So get a lot of people emailing. I do my best, but know this, that the brokers who work for me are some of my oldest and dearest and best friends. And it's not just, I don't know if nepotism is the right word because they're not family, but they feel like family to me. What it is that not only are they my oldest and dearest best friends going back to high school and grade school and all that kind of stuff, but they're distinguished in their own right. Several of them have been on Wall Street. We have Wharton grads. We have Masters of Business Administration from Temple University. Very, very, very accredited and successful in their own right, long before they came to work for me. People who will talk with you intelligently, and they're not order takers, albeit if you just want to place an order, great. But if you want to ask questions and have back and forth, please feel free to reach out, ask any questions you have. And if not returned by me, it'll be by someone not only that I have personally trained, but someone that I would consider a brother, even if we didn't work together.
Yeah. No, that's great. This has been really fascinating. Like I said before the show, this is the first person we've had on with precious metals, and gosh, she opened my eyes for sure. Couple questions that I ask every guest, and the first one is really just any advice you would give somebody who's maybe just starting out in their investment journey.
Same advice my father told me, or he'd fire me. Pay yourself first, always. I'm 53. I feel like I'm 19. I remember being 19, and I swear it was last night. And you wake up one day and holy crap, man, I got, where'd all this time go? And I think life is like a roll of toilet paper. When you're young, you don't notice it spinning. As you get older, you start to see the cardboard. You start to see it spinning faster and faster. Time has a way of creeping up on us all. And the only way to leave the rat race, the only way to get ahead is to pay yourself first. That gift my father gave me was the greatest gift he's ever given me, that I've ever been given by anyone. And it was the knowledge, understanding how important it is to prioritize yourself first. And even if it means putting $10 in a jar, well, $10 wouldn't be better to buy an ounce of silver, or $10 worth of Bitcoin, or whatever it is that you're going to buy outside the dollar, do it. And do it habitually, just like working out or dieting or studying or anything. If you're not habitual, if you're not methodical, you're going to suck at it. And make it part of your daily life, of your ritual, because everyone will wake up one day and look in the mirror, God willing, and say, where did all the time go? And I think to me, that is the best advice. And, pay yourself first, period, and save every single paycheck. You'll be glad you did. And it's amazing just how fast a year goes by. And as you get older and you have children maybe, and you watch your kids grow up, it seems like yesterday my kids were in diapers and now my youngest is 16. Where the hell did time go? I don't know. So I think that's the best advice. And everyone who works for me, I say to them, look, one rule, you better buy every 2 weeks or don't take the job. And I have been universally by every one of them thanked. Like, thank you so much for making me do that. You have no idea. Because all of a sudden 5, 6, 7 years goes by, and let the laws of compounding work for you instead of against you.
Yeah, that's not tremendous advice. And I loved that when you shared that story at the beginning. I think that's just awesome. Love it. And with the threat of firing you, that's awesome. That'll make it happen. How about a book recommendation? It doesn't have to be silver and gold related, but it certainly can be just something that's been impactful that you've read recently.
Let me grab it. Hang on. I got it right over here. I got 2 for you.
Okay.
The first one will blow your mind. It's a creature from Jekyll Island, and it explains exactly what the Federal Reserve is, both not federal nor a reserve. And it's written by a man named G. Edward Griffith. He still does podcasts. He's a very smart man. It's a big read, but it will change your life in reading it. But the one book that has had probably more profound impact on my career and on my life is this, The Art of War. It was written in the 5th century BC by a Chinese military strategist named Sun Tzu. And the whole concept of the book is how to beat your opponent without throwing a punch. It is taught in almost every major business school in the world on corporate hierarchy. It's taught on most law schools around the world in formulating arguments. It's mandatory reading at West Point. It's mandatory reading at the CIA. It's mandatory reading for most Japanese business executives. Bill Belichick, for you fantasy football players out there, if you've ever drafted a running back on the Patriots, if you're a fantasy football player, you know how frustrating it can be because one week a guy will score 4 touchdowns, and the next week he's not even he's not even dressed. They put him on the sidelines as a healthy scratch because Bill Belichick uses it to formulate game strategy. And if the opposing team said, geez, that guy scored 4 touchdowns last week, they gave him the ball 35 times, they're going to scheme their plan to stop that guy. Well, now that guy is sitting out this week or some other running back. The point of it is it's misdirection. It's the concept of misdirection. And misdirection is everywhere. It's in every game you've ever played, whether it be baseball, which, the hit and run or the squeeze bunt, or in football, the misdirection. Everyone moves to the right, including the line, and the tight end moves over here and everyone's over there. And it's misdirection. In chess, you flank the rook up this way and the queen goes this way, and misdirection is everywhere. And the mistake we all make is believing that our eyes are being honest with us. And that's not the case. So you have to understand that in a world where information disseminates as rapidly as it does, the powers that be misdirect through rhetoric, through price. Price is probably the greatest tool of misdirection, in my opinion, because people don't look under the hood. And this is exactly why, as the Western paper price has not reflected the demand in central bank acquisition, and they've been draining the exchanges dry, why they're now turning up the heat in China and raising the price by 10% over the Western price in silver and a little less in gold to misdirect once again. They want to very quietly accumulate without causing too much attention. And I think it's a very valuable lesson to understand that misdirection is all around us. And it's kind of the old theme of trust your gut. Don't go through life saying, damn it, I knew I should have done that. I didn't listen. I knew it. Your first reaction is typically the right one. And yet we don't listen to our inner voice. And we're all blessed with good intuition. But in a world as crazy as it is, and we're all so busy and trying to make ends meet and whatnot, we don't listen to ourselves enough. And so to me, your gut is your best financial advisor. And even when you're feeling misdirected, and many of the things that I've done in my life, including the last 4 years worth of podcasts, when I was out there screaming this stuff and everyone thought I was crazy, I trusted my gut and I went out on a limb and said, no, this is what's happening. And I was proven right. And you know what? It's a lot sweeter when that happens. And if I was wrong, then I was wrong. And I don't have anyone to blame but myself. And I would say use that in terms of your finances. We're all accountable for our decisions from the time we're little kids. You pull your sister's hair, you get in big trouble. You cheat on your girlfriend, she breaks up with you. You drive drunk. Hopefully the worst thing that happens, you make it home safe and get in trouble by your parents or your wife or whatever, but not kill someone or end up in jail. Everything we do, we're accountable for. You cheat on your taxes, you're going away. You name it, right? But the most important thing of managing our life's work that we spend all this time working for years and years and years, and then we take all this money and we give it to Joe Schmo or Jane Schmo, the financial advisor, who doesn't have the same vested interest in preserving that money as you do, instead of taking accountability. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that trust your gut, take accountability. The Art of War helped me understand that, helped me realize that we're being misdirected and you have to kind of take a step back and see things for what they are. And sometimes that's a lonely existence. Sometimes that means taking accountability. But I got a lot out of that book, probably more than anything I've ever read, and it's impacted my career immeasurably.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Sounds really good. And I'll definitely, those are two that I just need to put on my list as well. So thank you so much, Andy. This has been really good, and I really appreciate you being on the Wealth Flow.
You got it, brother. I'd love to come back anytime. And I have a feeling you might want me to come back, not because of how well this went, but because I think there's going to be a lot of things happening. There's 200 meetings from the beginning of this year to the big BRICS meeting in October, all of them in Russia related to BRICS, all of them about leaving the dollar behind. And then you got the election in November. And with all of the things happening, I think gold and silver will take a little bit more of a prominent role in what's happening. So if indeed I'm right and you do want to pick up where we left off, you can count me in and count me as interested. And I hope to look forward to picking up where indeed we did leave off.
Sounds good, Andy. I appreciate it. That'd be great.
Being that you're still here, I trust you found value in this episode. I personally wish I would have known these guests and strategies when I started my wealth creation journey. Go to wealthflow.capital to subscribe to our newsletter. And as a free gift, we will send you our quarterly market report and the top 10 things to look for in an investment opportunity. Take a minute to give our show a rating and review. Help us reach 1 million professionals by subscribing and sharing this episode with someone you know who could also find value in it.